Do you know what legacy means?
It's what you pass down to your children and your children's children. It's what remains of you when you're gone.
Hey everybody, welcome to what is sure to be a very lively discussion. We've got some great things on tap for this particular episode of House of the Empire. We're looking at House of the Dragon Season 2. We're going to be trying to look forward to Season 3, and then some interesting insights onto what happened on the Snow Show. All that and more to come here on this live episode. Or if you're tuning in on the podcatchers, it's not quite as live, but hopefully still a lively debate. I'm Zach, and I'm here with Sean and Randy. Sean, it's good to be back, man. We're a couple of weeks removed from the Season 2 finale, and we get to provide some thoughts on that and try to look ahead as well.
Yeah, you know, the week one, I was sitting there on Sunday night going, fuck. What am I going to watch? And then it hit us that we hadn't watched the... Anybody else hear that?
Oh, yeah. What you got going?
I got
Somebody
nothing
watch-
going. It's not me.
Somebody watching Netflix?
It's not me.
It quit after Randy muted his
Yeah,
mic.
it might have been on Randy's then. We might be getting background audio from him. So apologies for that, everybody. But yeah, I didn't know what to watch, and then it hit us that we hadn't watched the last the House That Dragons Built episode. So it was like, oh, awesome, sweet, we get a 20-minute episode. And then this past Sunday was just way too busy anyway, so didn't really miss it then. But yeah, you know, this is what you get when you get a 8-episode season, right? It comes and it goes and it's gone.
This should have been the week that we're discussing the season finale, and yet it happened 2 weeks ago. Randy, how are you feeling about 8 episodes versus 10 if this should have been the finale? And are you missing it in any way?
Yeah, like Sean, it was definitely weird to sit there and be like, hey, it's Sunday. Wait, damn, it's already done. So it was just that getting that adjustment period, and it sucks. But again, when you get a short season, that tends to happen. But at least with the season, it felt like it was quality versus like what we've gotten with some of the shorter Game of Thrones seasons near the end, where it felt rushed. This kind of felt like they had a plan and they kind of stuck to it. But other than that, it's a bummer. It just because you're so vested in these characters and you're so into it and just ready to, keep going with it. And then it's over, just like that. And it just kind of sucks in that respect. But at least it lets you know that you enjoyed the season well enough that you're ready for the next one to come out, and at least you can build that hype within yourself and that excitement and really just kind of sit down and enjoy it once it's back. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I'm at with it right now.
Build the hype within yourself is a good phrase, because that's something that Thrones fans have learned how to do for the better part of a decade now. Is get yourself hyped up and find a way to survive in the interim. Sean, you mentioned the House that Dragons Built. Obviously, we've got 8 seasons of television out there. We've got the Night of the Seven Kingdoms coming up. What do you intend to do to fill the void now that the season is over? You got any particular plans for post Season 2, pre-Season 3, besides Night of the Seven Kingdoms?
Excellent segue, and we didn't even talk about it beforehand. So for those of you that are tuning into our content each and every week, debuting, I guess it would be the week of September 16th. We don't have a day where our pre-recorded content is going to air yet, but on that week, you will see a review of not the first pilot, but technically the second pilot of Game of Thrones from us. And each and every week following, you will get an episode of Game of Thrones. Now, we're not recording one a week. We're going to be recording 2 a week. And much like with House of the Dragon, we're going to have a couple of different teams going at it. 1 week, for back-to-back weeks, you'll get Zach and I, and then and possibly Randy, possibly Ryan, possibly Jade, maybe Kieran. Depends who the third person will be, given on availability. And on the other 2 weeks, you'll get 3 other people. So, and we're going to do that. And Zach and I were talking about it. It's like, oh wow, that's like 73 weeks of content right there. And we'll actually have to take a break for A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, even though we might be done recording by the time it comes out in terms of the release schedule. Yeah, this is our chance to finally dive into each and every episode of Game of Thrones. And as much coverage as Zach and I have done over the years of Game of Thrones, we have never taken the time to go into each and every episode. Zach, I believe you said that your spouse is going to watch along with you. Jade's going to watch along with me. So Sunday nights are going to remain a night in Westeros for us, anyway.
Yeah, I'm particularly excited about that because, like you said, we as podcasters and as fans of the series have never really had the opportunity to go episode by episode and look at the pros and the cons of each one. And I know that we're doing this live, so I'm not going to like go into it too much, but I think it might be a worthwhile endeavor to go into like a rating system so that we can like empirically rank each episode if we have the time and the inclination for it. Because there are some that are like middle of the season episodes that maybe feel like duds, or some stuff in later seasons that maybe some people like or dislike more than others. And so IMDb can have their ratings, and we'll come up with maybe a Legacy of Westeros type of rating. But yeah, that is something that that we're looking forward to doing here on the channel. Hope you all hit that like and subscribe button so that you can keep up with every episode. I may be mistaken, Sean, but we're trying to keep them to under an hour discussions, right? Something in the 30 to 45 minute range.
Yeah, so it's more than likely a lot of the episodes are going to come in somewhere between 40 minutes and an hour. Like if we get to something like Blackwater, it's probably going to be an hour long. Same with the pilot. I feel ashamed of myself for Baylor. That's probably an hour episode. So the big episodes will be given a little extra time to breathe. But like, it's not like we're going to be sitting here going, well, what does this lead to on the next week? And spending a half an hour doing that. Really, it'll be just a dive into some of the more nuanced things I think that a show like Game of Thrones provides on the rewatchability factor.
Randy, we're a couple of weeks removed from House of the Dragon. How do you feel like its rewatchability factor is after you've taken a couple of days to breathe and let it settle in your system?
Well, I think, definitely getting at least one more rewatch, just because there's always those little things you miss, little nuanced things that you don't pick up on right away. Like everybody near else, when you go online and see videos like, this is what this means, and this is what this means, and this is how this impacts this, and you're just kind of going, I just watched the show for the sake of watching the show and to watch a good story. At least with a rewatch, you're gonna get that. Okay, I see where they're coming from here, and I can understand this better now because I see these little things I missed before. And I think that's half the fun that's going to be with rewatching Game of Thrones as well. It's that it's picking up on the little subtle things that you weren't paying attention to at first because you were just so absorbed with everything else, and like either the shock or the excitement or whatever's happen to be going on at the time, that now you can really just kind of kick back, relax, and just enjoy the little things that you miss. And that's why. So I think it's going to be really fun to go back and rewatch House of the Dragon for sure, just to catch up on that.
Is there a character or an episode or a moment that you might pay more attention to than another? Because for me, I think I want to pay much more attention to the scenes in Harrenhal. I want to dissect the stuff between Damon and Alice more than I was able to on a single watch through. So, are there any elements like that that you're going to want to pay extra attention to in a rewatch?
I do feel like that is definitely a good example of something that you really want to kind of dig into. But also, like for me, just paying a little more attention to Aegon and like his, how
Yeah.
just watching that descent for him from basically saying I'm the king, even though I don't want to be king, to
Mhm.
nobody wants me here. I'll show them, and it's that just you start from a high with him and he's trying to be a good king, and next thing you know it just starts all going downhill. And there's always those performances where there's little, I wouldn't say ticks, but just those things where you can just see something in the eyes or see something in the body language that you weren't paying attention to before. And I think that that's going to be an interesting part of the rewatch, is watching Aegon go from where he was to where he is now, which is basically on the run.
Yeah, he had a very interesting arc because I think he felt somewhat invincible even after the death of his son. Like, I don't think he felt like he could be touched. And I think he wanted to have a brush with danger. And I think that's what led him to ride out on his dragon. And he faced a very harsh reality about his mortality in that battle. And after that, I think he was a lot more quiet, a lot more docile, a lot more humble. And so his character arc in season 2 is definitely going to be something to pay attention to. Sean, we've listed Damon and Aegon. Is there anybody else from season 2 or any other storyline from season 2 that if you were to do a rewatch, I know we're already going through Game of Thrones, but when we're looking at the rewatchability factor of season 2, what do you think the most rewatchable storyline is for you?
Well, it's already been said, unpopular opinion probably, but it's the Harrenhal stuff. When you look back at the season and where it finally ended up, and what was shown in the finale, I think you have to go back now and start from step one and watch it all the way through. Because other than that, like I know Rhaenyra gets the most uh, screen time, but look back in terms of what she had to do this season, and I don't know. Like there's not a ton there in my opinion. And I know we're not talking about season one, but just like sitting here today, um, Monday night, someone asked me, "Hey, right now you can watch two different things. You can do a binge of season two, or go back and binge season one." Got to be honest, fellas, I'm binging season one.
Hmm. So season 1 has a higher bingeability factor. Do you think it just has the highest rewatch where you could like drop into a single episode and get more out of it than if you dropped into a single episode of season 2?
Um, there's a couple episodes in season two that I think are right there with some of the best episodes of season one.
Okay.
But for me, I'm captivated by fantastic acting. The whole show has fantastic production value. You can get great cinematography from both seasons, great editing, great sound design. But at the end of the day, we essentially only get two episodes of Otto Hightower in season two, and we get some cameos of Viserys. They're all over season one, and so I'm more likely to go back to Hello Cat cameo. I'm more likely to go back to that than season two. And I'm not saying season two's bad. I really enjoyed season two, but I do think for budgetary reasons um, and other things, I don't think season two had the conclusion that I think fans deserved for a variety of reasons. Ryan Condal saying you're going to get two big battles and we only got one, and it just You know, Zach, you and I have talked about it before, and we're going to be talking about Game of Thrones endlessly here coming up. And it's probably not going to take us an entirely long time to get to Blackwater. But Blackwater is Blackwater because season 2 has such great build to it.
Mm-hmm.
And we got that big episode in season 4, The Red Dragon and the Gold, for season 2 of House of the Dragon. But then it was more build up for the next 3 episodes.
Mm-hmm.
And there was no Blackwater at the end. It was, let's play all these houses' themes and show the marching and what's to come, and that can be the big payoff. And I think they're quickly finding out, with not just the diehards but the casuals, that while people may not have left the show yet, it was the wrong call.
Well, it's the storytelling version of edging, if you'll pardon the euphemism, but that's essentially what they did to us. And now we're sitting on the edge, literally, for like another year and a half or so. Randy, what did you make of that storytelling decision? Because in one sense, they show all of the armies marching off to battle. You see dragons flying. You know where the lines are drawn as far as house loyalties are concerned. Everybody is preparing for war. So in a certain sense, it kind of makes sense to drop it off where they did, so that you're not having to see like one part of a battle, but then have to wait till next year or 2 years from now to see the next part. Like, they're just going to try to hopefully show all of it in season 3. So like, from that sense, I kind of get it, but how do you feel about the way that they left things?
So literally, I sat there and went, "Wait, that's it? Hold on a second. There's got to be more, right?"
Mm-hmm.
And then nothing. And I was just like, "Okay." I mean, I don't hate the episode, but yet I'm kind of disappointed.
Right.
It's that, it's that build up where you're just like, "Okay, here we go," and then you just kind of, "Oh, this is what we're doing."
Mm-hmm.
I honestly, give me 5 more minutes, and I would have, if it was up to me, I probably, if I was going to, like, this is what we're going to do, this is what we want to do, we want to kind of have that suspenseful moment, try to build things up a little bit. I literally would have had some of the armies getting ready to charge and then cut, because that way it's like everybody goes, okay, season 3 is popping off from the word go, because we're going to get a major battle right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
And then you could just, as you're recapping, as you're leading in, you can start it right from there as everybody finally lines up and starts charging.
I guess what I'm worried about is that they would give you that build up, and then you would open the season looking at the aftermath or something, like as a way of cost cutting and like saving money and trying to like read between the lines, much like Game of Thrones did in the first couple of seasons before Blackwater. You're just seeing the bodies strewn about, kind of like the burning mill. They gave that to us for just a few seconds, but there is a precedent with budget saving methods to not show the battle outright, but show them going off to battle and then showing what happens afterwards. And I guess by not showing that, they now leave it open to interpretation as to where this battle is going to take place, what the battle is going to, result in, yada yada. But I'm with you that the best type of cliffhangers are the ones that leave you like wanting to immediately see what happens in the next season. I think one of the best examples, and I don't know how well this is going to ring with you guys. I don't know if y'all are into Star Trek at all, but The Next Generation, when Captain Picard is assimilated by the Borg and Riker gives the command to fire the torpedoes, even though his captain is on the ship. He says fire, but we don't see the torpedoes fire in that season. We just know that he's given the command, and then the blue lettering comes up and says to be continued. Quite possibly one of the biggest cliffhangers in modern television, semi-modern television. So, like, there are times where that has happened. There are times where that is useful, but they they chose not to do something like that. And it's interesting to think about why those creative choices happened. Let's end this season 2 discussion on a high note, though. I know that we talked about the rewatchability is rather low, and that there are certain storylines that we're going to want to rewatch. What was the most satisfying thing about season 2 for you guys? I know there's a lot to be desired in certain areas, but Sean, what was like the most redeeming quality, the most satisfying thing you got out of season 2?
Man, that's tough because it's so easy to go, well, hey, there's still no show on television or streaming service that gives you the production quality or the sound design or um, the cinematography. All that stuff's always, I call it fandom pornography. It's it's very enlightening in multiple ways. Um, I guess for me, though, the surprise I got, and I got it more than once, was Viserys, right? And I'm not saying it's like the best part of the season,
No,
but he
but I
was my
didn't say that. I didn't say that. I said most satisfying.
yeah,
What was
he
the
was
most
my favorite
satisfying?
character in season 1, and I'd heard Patty say that one of the reasons he took on the role was because he just wanted to be one and done, leave an impact on something, and then not return. So the fact that they were able to convince him to come back was, um, astonishing to me. And then he goes one step further and says, "I'm only coming back if, in one of the scenes, I get to wear the crazy makeup and have the long makeup day, getting a prosthetic day, getting it all set up." That's like, oh shit, that's commitment. So
Mhm.
I think the show had more of an impact on him than he thought it was going to have. And for me, I enjoyed that as a fan, experiencing that on camera in story and the stuff they showed behind the scenes.
That's pretty cool. That is pretty cool. Randy, most satisfying part of season 2.
So I think for me, I'm gonna go for some low hanging fruit on this one, and I'll preface it with, when it came to Game of Thrones, we saw dragons, but we didn't, and we saw what they were capable of, but we didn't get to see, that real dragon on dragon violence. And this season, we got it. We got that beautiful fight scene, just to see the maneuverability of the dragons, just to see the emotion that the dragons gave by themselves, just through their eyes alone. They did an excellent job with that, whether it was in battle or out. The dragons for me were by far, the one thing that I was just excited about, because you've seen stuff like that in the past, and and it's always kind of comes off half-assed, but they went for it. They went all in on the dragons this season, and I absolutely loved it.
That was probably one of my favorite things as well, was seeing the personalities. We had heard before season 1 dropped that there were very distinct personality traits in each of the dragons, but they really hadn't had enough screen time to really showcase that. I think we got that with Sea Smoke. I think we got that with Vermithor. I think we got that with Sunfire and Caraxes to a certain extent. So to be able to see those different personalities and see the way that they carry themselves around their handlers, around others, was definitely interesting to see. But I'm not gonna echo it too much, because I want to provide one more little nugget about what I found satisfying in season 2. Um, Game of Thrones as a concept has always been about world building, and it's always been about having like a very diverse cast that can help carry the show. It's not just one or two people, it's an ensemble. And as much of an ensemble as season 1 turned out to be, season 2 added a whole bunch of supporting characters like the brothers Adam and Alan. You added Hugh Hammer and his family. You added Ulf. You added more scenes and more context for characters like Missaria, who was just kind of a secondary, tertiary type character in season 1. And you gave Jace more scenes and more growth. And so Rhaena had some stuff off by herself in the second half of the season. So I think they did a really good job of making this even more of an ensemble than season 1 was. And I appreciated just how well they were able to dedicate screen time to certain storylines and flesh it all out. So the supporting cast and the ensemble nature of season 2 really impressed me.
Jace was a standout for me.
Mm-hmm. I liked how princely he became, and I'm hoping that we'll get more of that in season 3. And that kind of takes us into our season 3 discussion. What kind of things are we looking forward to? What kind of things are we hoping for? We can reference source material if we want to. I'm gonna give the green light for that, but maybe more like a greenish yellow. So let's if we want to bring up particular battles or particular moments or things like that, let's be careful about how deliberate we are talking about them, because some of us maybe don't know the context, some of us don't know the spoilers, or it can be just purely from a creative standpoint. As a viewer, as a consumer, as a reviewer, what kind of things do we look for or forward to in season 3? Randy, you want to kick us off?
So there's a few things I can think of for season 3, because I know, like, the one moment I want to see, just because it's been foreshadowed since season 1, is Daemon versus Aemon, and I'm sure that's season 4. I mean, I don't think they're going to put that in season 3, because I think it's I'm sure it's going to be quite the battle, even though I don't know what happens. It just feels like it's going to be something huge, and I can't wait for that. But that's probably season 4. As far as season 3 goes, obviously I want to kind of see, obviously we'll get some more, we'll get more dragon battles, which will be cool. Obviously we're going to see more dragons in season 3, because they've been hinting at more than just what we've seen, and obviously we got to see that as well at the end of season 2. I think, was that what they call it, sheep stealer or something like that?
Yes.
Sheep
okay.
stealer.
Yep.
So we got to see that dragon, which I thought was really cool. So I'm going to be curious to see how they bring, how that they portray that particular dragon, since all we know is, pretty much roasting sheep. Other than that, I'm curious about Jace's growth as a character. I want to see definitely more there for him. I'm very curious to see what happens with Otto, because, as we've all know, Otto definitely seems to be the 99% of the brain of Team Green.
Yep.
And he's such a damn good actor too. So it's just like the gravitas that every time he was on screen.
Yep.
And it was sorely missed once he left, for sure. So I'm definitely hoping we get more of him. Obviously, we'll see what happens with everybody else now that it's Alicent's given her blessing for Rhaenyra to do what she needs to do. But it's just like there's just all these little story paths that they're just starting to branch out. But the ones that really interest me the most is really gonna be Jace's growth, Aegon's growth while he's in hiding. You got to figure what happens with Otto, and ultimately, I'm curious just to see if Daemon can hold true to what he had his epiphany at the end of season 2. I'll be curious to see if he can hold on to that and stay true to Rhaenyra, because he just seems like such a wild card, like almost like a bipolar. Like one minute he's ready to ready to do what he wants to do, and the next minute he's just like something sets him off and he goes off and does his own thing. So that's gonna be big. Those gonna be the biggest ones. Obviously, we're gonna get some war here, so hopefully we'll be curious. I'll be curious to see how many war crimes are committed in this next season.
Well, that was a pretty big one That was a pretty big part of the beginning of season 2. Pretty big storyline in the context of the source material, that being Blood and Cheese. There is another, what I would call, important piece of the source material that is still to come. Sean, I'm not going to mention it outright, but what are you looking forward to, and how closely do you hope that it will follow the source material?
I think the end of season 2 took the source material and chucked it off a 132nd story balcony. And I think any of us would be foolish to think that they're going to stick very close to the source material at all at this point. I think you'll see some key battles and their take on those key battles, but like in terms of character fates or showdowns or whatever, like to me that's out the window now. I'm excited for more Winterfell. I'm excited for Cregan, obviously. Zach just lit up there.
I'm trying to point, but I've got a green screen, so I can't. I'm pointing, but it's offside here. I'm like, look up, people. But no.
So I'm excited for that because that's a no-brainer. They actually cut him out of the finale. And with that scene where they're all walking across the bridge, it turns out he was with them. Clearly, they decided to take a different stance on that. And he was cut out. You can see it in behind the scenes. So I'm excited for that. We now know something that we didn't know the last time we were on here doing this, and that is the show's only 4 seasons. And that'll be it. I think the unfortunate part is we know that both of those seasons are now only going to contain 8 episodes. And George R. R. Martin, who resigned from the writing staff, had always said he thought that they needed minimum 4 10-episode seasons to tell this properly. And so when it's all said and done, you're going to look at, potentially 6 episodes less than that. And I don't know, like I'm excited, but I'm not marrying myself to any source material stuff. Because obviously we could sit here and be like, anyone can foreshadow Aemon versus Daemon. You don't have to be source material guy to figure that out.
Right.
But Allison's thing's gone a whole different route. Even Rhaenyra's kind of a little bit different. Obviously there's stuff with Alice Rivers and Helena, and are they one and the same? And Nettles has been cut out, and which is one of George R. R. Martin's favorite characters. So like it's so hard for me to sit here and say. So I'll end it with this. I don't know if it's an excited. I think it's a curious thing for me, and that is Game of Thrones does the big battle sequences like no other show in television history. Period. We have yet to see that from House of the Dragon. And yes, for me, that includes the Red Dragon and the Gold, which at the end of the day was only 10 minutes of that episode. And in truth, not very much dragon fighting at all. Like one might argue there's more dragon fighting in the Long Night episode of season 8 of Game of Thrones than there is in that episode. You just see it a lot better because the one's at nighttime and intentionally very, very dark, and the other one's in broad daylight. So I am curious to see if this production team, which contains some of the same Game of Thrones guys, will deliver on that level. Like, say what you want. Yeah, it's eye candy with the Game of Thrones stuff. But you go to Blackwater, you go to Hardhome, you go to Watchers on the Wall, you go to Battle of the Bastards, you go to the Money Train episode. As much as those are, fandom pornography in terms of the visuals, they all have massive story beats that hit you emotionally. And this show has yet to have an opportunity to do that, in my opinion. And for the Red Dragon and the Gold, it was like, it's not that I wasn't emotional about how it ended with Rhaenys, but now being, I guess, 6 weeks removed from that episode, I can sit here and go, yeah, no, that didn't hit me on the emotional level that a lot of the big Game of Thrones battles did. Like I was telling Zach, I introduced my 16-year-old to Game of Thrones, and I did that with Watchers on the Wall. It was either going to be that or Blackwater. And so as we were watching Watchers on the Wall, there's
Should
just
have been Blackwater.
so many beats during that episode where I'm like, oh my God, even though I haven't seen the show in like a couple of years, it's like, wow, this is emotional and it's investing. And so I do think they have their work cut out for them. I'm not saying they're not up for the challenge, but there's still a lot of proof it there.
Well, the general populace would seem to be of the belief that that may be one of the best episodes of Game of Thrones that they've had, period. 9.5 out of 10 on IMDb with several thousand reviews coming in. So it ranks, I want to say, in the top 10, maybe like in the top 12 of any Game of Thrones episode. We're not here to debate that individual episode, but I feel like it does have some redeeming story beats personally. And the payoff of the fate of the queen who never was, doing a very queenly action in trying to protect her people. I appreciated it, but I do miss her because, like we were talking a little while ago, when Otto is often gone and Viserys is dead, and now Rhaenys is dead, a lot of the people that were carrying the show on their backs are now gone. And I think the thing that I'm anticipating about season 3 is seeing who's going to step up, because it can't just be Rhaenyra carrying it. It can't be just Daemon. It can't be just Aemond. It can't be just Larys having a side quest with Aegon. Like, you're going to need some people to step up. And you're either going to need Otto to come back, or you're going to need a new player, or you're going to need someone who surprises us with some very witty banter or something. But I'm anticipating a step up in the dialogue and some of the story exposition because of the loss of some of those people.
That's another source material change is guess what? Otto doesn't get captured in the source material. So not that I'm saying it's a bad thing. It's a TV show. You got to be able to separate the two. I know that alone ruined Game of Thrones season 7 and 8 for a lot of people. But the last thing I want is people to get married to bullet point source material and then be upset for the show doing its own thing. It's a show. You got 16 episodes left. You're halfway through. You're more than halfway through the series at this point. 18 episodes in the books, 16 more to go.
Randy, what would you say would be one of the quote unquote wildest things that they would try to do in season 3? If we're going to make like bold season 3 predictions, what would your bold hot take be for the next season?
Bold hot take. Yeah, that would be quite interesting to really think about, just because you don't really know, how well they're going to follow the source material. Obviously, you guys are familiar with it. I'm not, because I have not read the books, and that's by choice. I want to get through the series first and kind of see how it's different. I did that with Harry Potter, and I have a much more of appreciation for that because I did that. So I would feel like something wild would be maybe Jace taking lead in a huge like pivotal battle for, whether it be near Harrenhal or closer to King's Landing, or just something that's, you would think is out of character, yet when you see how Jace was affected near the end of season 2, you feel like something's brewing, something's bubbling, something is going to make him make a decision and make a business decision at this point of doing something to prove that he deserves to be the next in line. And I'm not saying he's going to go Aegon on us and be drunk doing it at the time, but it wouldn't surprise me if something like that happened with him as a more of a show of strength and a show of that, Rhaenyra can trust him with these bigger responsibilities that would befall him potentially in the future if he were to become king.
So possibly drunk on power, drunk on responsibility instead of intoxicated.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it.
I think I want to see more of Jace. I'm not sure how much more of him we're going to see. That's just my 2 cents. I think there's going to be a lot of pivotal stuff that's going to take place in season 3, and he may have played a good role in kind of setting things up for it in season 2. I'm curious and uncertain about how much of a role he's going to play when shit actually hits the fan. So we'll have to wait and see. Sean, hot takes, bold predictions for season 3.
Here's a bold prediction for the end of the show. Not exactly what you asked, but I've been thinking about this. They went out of their way to show us the White Walkers. We didn't need to see them. They didn't have to be there. But they went out of their way to show us that. So I predict, given that Daemon, and I won't tell you if he lives or dies in the source material, because I don't know. That's the truth. I have not read all the source material. Obviously, he's got to die at some point. He's not going to live 200 plus years. But given what he sees, and given how serious that is, and given that the Targaryens and the Starks have an alliance, and we believe there's a chance Cregan knows about what's going on with all that stuff as well, that some group of people towards the end of the show are going to travel north of the wall, and it's going to end very, very badly for them. And I predict that Daemon is going to be one of them. I know that is nowhere close to source material stuff, but neither was a lot of what they ended season 2 with. So I would be okay with that if that's done right. Almost like the opposite of, oh my God, Zach, what's my favorite episode called? It's called Beyond the Wall. Is that what it's called?
Yep.
Yeah. So almost the opposite of that episode where, they go on some sort of excursion. Basically, most of them made it back except for, one real character, where this time they would all have to die, whoever goes beyond. So that is my towards the end of the series prediction. Couldn't see it happening in season 3. And in terms of season 3, I don't think it'll be as war heavy as people think. Okay. It'll be there. It'll be more than season 2. But I think there's people that automatically assume, the premiere is going to be war. 4 or 5 will be this big battle, and 8 will be this big battle. We're getting 3 and 8 episodes, and I just don't think there's a chance that's happening.
No, I don't either. In fact, my bold predictions don't really have anything to do with battle sequences. If I had to mention something that I would be looking forward to, I want ship battles. I would hope ship battles are taking place now that you've got that fleet amassing in Essos, and now that the Velaryons finally have their fleet kind of put back together. I would hope for ship battles, but I'm not going to make any bold predictions and say that it's going to happen. I can hope, but I don't believe it's going to. Here's what I think will happen. I think Rhaenyra has too many dragons. I think these last 2 episodes of season 2 have given her a overly decided advantage when it comes to dragon fighting. And my bold prediction is somebody is going turncoat. I don't know who, I don't know for what reason, but I think Ulf's mannerisms in the last couple of episodes make me think that maybe he's not as loyal to Rhaenyra as some of the other people in her courts are. And I think somebody like Ulf, or somebody who is ambitious, or somebody who is desperate to prove themselves, there's all kinds of reasons why you would turncoat. But I think at least one character from Rhaenyra's faction is going to flip to Team Green, and it will make the sides a bit more even and increase the stakes a bit more. It'll make Rhaenyra hesitate about when to strike and how heavy-handedly to strike. Right now, she's got these plans to go up and down the coast and go after places like Lannisport and, divide and conquer. I think she'll have to reconsider that when one of her own betrays her.
You mentioned the ship battles, man. We were talking about, can they do big battles as good as Game of Thrones? Closest thing we see to that in Game of Thrones is Blackwater, which isn't really ship battles, ship on ship. I guess there's some stuff in the tail end with the Greyjoys, but like it's over in a blip. So I don't think we've really seen ship on ship battle like we see in like when I think ship on ship battle, I think Pirates of the Caribbean and how well it's done in some of those movies, and those are big $200+ million movies, each one of them, and it's like, all right, so how are you going to do this with a lot more ships and not have it look like terrible bad CGI? Like, I don't know what their intent on the approach is there, because I can tell you one of the more off-putting things in season 1 of Game of Thrones is when they're traveling to Storm's End and back, and they're on the ship, or when they're traveling with Viserys later on. Like, you can very much tell, oh, we're not actually in water here. This is CG, and it looks a little out of place. And for that battle that we're talking about, what is it, the Gullet?
Battle of the Gullet. Yep.
You can't do that. I'm sorry. If you do it that way, you are tanking your battle quality that you've established in prior Westerosi episodes.
Well, the other caveat is, aside from Wildfire, we really haven't seen anything in terms of explosives in the Game of Thrones universe. So there aren't cannons to have cannon fire like in Pirates of the Caribbean. That has not been established on these types of ships. So a lot of what they're going to have is going to be like galleons that are shooting flaming arrows at these wooden ships. So a lot of the battle sequences and a lot of the CG is going to be dedicated just towards the fire effects, the pyro that you would need in a fight like that, because it's going to be flaming ship on flaming ship, and then it's going to be dragons setting things ablaze. So if a ship to ship battle occurs, I think it'll involve a lot of pyro. I'll just say that. So that's probably why it didn't happen in this season, and probably why it's not going to be as big as I'm picturing it in my head whenever it does finally come around. But those are some of our bold predictions for a look ahead to season 3. Let's wrap things up by talking a little bit about the sequel series that had been in the works for a while. We finally got news that it was no longer in production, that it was no longer being worked on, that not even was anything happening behind the scenes. And we actually got a quote from Jon Snow himself, Kit Harrington, when he was speaking out about some other elements, and Game of Thrones got brought up. He said that, and I quote, "We spent a couple of years back and forth developing it, and it just didn't, nothing got us excited enough." And here's where it gets interesting. Quote, "In the end, I kind of backed out and said, I think if we push this any further and keep developing it, we could end up with something that's not good. And that's the last thing we all want." End quote. Sean, I know you have a lot of thoughts on it. I'm going to dish it to Randy first so that you can go on a tangent after. Randy, what do you make of those comments by Kit Harrington now that we know that the Snow Show is officially shelved?
Well, I guess when you really think about it, if you want you have expectations of a specific type of quality, a story you want to tell, like and if it's not there, you don't want to put out a inferior product. Now, I'm not saying that in the end they couldn't have figured it all out. It just would have taken more time. And and maybe that's what it boiled down to is like, we just don't he I don't have the time to I want to be bothered by this, but however, I need to make a statement. That could have been very well what happened. I feel like no story is truly dead. I feel like if you work at it and work together as a group, eventually you can iron out all the issues and get something cohesive that everybody can get behind. And, clearly that, cooler heads didn't prevail, and he decided to not go through and just trying to raise the level of quality beyond of what he was expecting. And that's fine. And is it a bummer? Of course. Jon Snow is a very well liked character. So the fact that we have wonder what if, it is what it is in that respect. It's not to say that someone else may not attempt something like that down the road again, but I would say at that point it would probably be without Kit Harrington, and I know a lot of people would not approve of that. So I don't know. I just kind of, it would have been nice if we got the show, just because I did enjoy the character. I enjoyed his story arc in Game of Thrones. So, oh well, it's a bummer, and it seems to be like that's what happens with TV nowadays. Whether it's that proves that even Game of Thrones isn't immune to this sort of thing, because for Sean and I, with Star Wars and stuff, all the stuff that gets canceled on the regular and or were promised and never even comes to even fruition, or not even past the writing stage, it's just a shame. It really is. And it's a bummer for the fans, but at least we're still getting stuff down the road when it's not like it was the only thing in the works.
Yeah, that's true. There's a lot that's in the works, a lot that's still going on behind the scenes. Night of the Seven Kingdoms comes out next year, and it's going to be what they call a 6-episode miniseries. And I believe that was what Kit Harrington was originally looking for out of the Snow series. He wanted something that was more predominantly beyond the wall, something that was just kind of Snow specific. It was like a quasi sequel. And from what Sean and I had been able to gather, they were the studios and the powers that be were fleshing it out and making it much more than that. It was looking to be 8 or possibly 10 episodes, and it was going to involve a lot more characters. Liam Cunningham, who plays Davos, was reaching out saying, I want to be part of the project. It grew to be a lot more than a North of the Wall limited series. And I think that just possibly made Harrington a bit uncomfortable about the direction that they were trying to take it. But you can't have a Snow series without Snow. And so he kind of had all the power there when it came to making those final calls about how it's going to go. But Sean, I know you have a lot of thoughts. You've been saving up those thoughts. So I'm going to yield the floor to you, because you've had your finger on the pulse for a lot longer and a lot more than either of us combined, I feel like. So the floor is yours, sir.
Well, I think Randy was making reference to the Acolyte, and let's just be perfectly clear. This situation was not that. Lucasfilm kiboshed the Acolyte before anyone else could do it, and HBO and WBD desperately wanted a Jon Snow show, and it was Kit Harrington that ended up saying, you know what, I'm done. And I know Zach didn't say his remarks afterwards, but he basically said he's not going to watch Game of Thrones for a long time, and he can't see himself doing anything again with it. But look, I'll go out on record right now and say, not only will we see Jon Snow again, he will be played by Kit Harrington. But I think the problem is what Zach said, is we're not far removed from Kit Harrington basically having no life outside of Game of Thrones, where they weren't getting almost a year off like they are now with House of the Dragon, um, in between filming. It was pretty consistent with, you might get a month, 2 months off, and you were right back at it in freezing temperatures and non-glamorous places in terms of where he was going. And it was very much becoming not the Jon Snow show, but the beginning, which would sort of feel like the Jon Snow show that kind of builds into an actual Game of Thrones sequel. Which I think is fine if you're upfront about that. As a guy who's covered a lot of Halloween movies and now the TV series, and there's a whole book on lost sequels. Look, executives interfere all the time. WBD is an absolute mess right now. Randy's Randy's a big AEW fan. I'm a lukewarm AEW fan at this point. And they're attached to WBD. DC's attached to WBD. And let me tell you, those movies don't make bank at the box office. They're going to be even in more trouble. They needed a massive, massive home run to the scale of House of the Dragon. And I think they were thinking they could not necessarily fix Game of Thrones, but turn it into that. And there's a big difference between committing to, I'm going to come back for a 6, 8, 10 episode run and then be done with it, to, oh, you want me to sign up for another 4, 5, 6, 7 years of this. Yeah, probably not great for a guy who's trying to start a family and both him and his wife work in Hollywood. And the other thing you have here is George R. R. Martin was heavily involved in it. Well, guess what? George R. R. Martin's books don't line up with Game of Thrones. He has spoken out against the end of Game of Thrones. And then you run into almost what happened with the Dr. Sleep movie, where it's like, would it have been a continuation of Game of Thrones? Or would it have been, yeah, we'll reference this stuff, but you really also got to play off how I intend to end my books if I ever get around to doing it, which is a problem. Dr. Sleep might have, tiptoed around, being a good sequel to the Shining novel and the Shining movie. But it still gets a little clunky at parts where it's like, oh, you're serving as a sequel to both. And guess what? Those two things don't line up super, super well. So like there was just so many things working against it. It's the project I wanted most. Like when people talk about the Gold Company show or 10,000 Ships or some of the animated stuff, I'm just like, I don't give a shit. No offense. Like, I want the sequel show. I want the Aegon the Conqueror show. More importantly, more than all of them, their big money maker that they have sitting there that I think they're saving, Robert's Rebellion, which guess what? Contains almost all the characters, all the older characters from Game of Thrones that would require younger recasts, and Zach's favorite Stannis would return. There are other options here in terms of the Snow Show, though. It was heartbreaking to have that happen after following the pre-production for, upwards of 2 years, where we were getting fairly consistent updates. And then there was like this 6-month period where like nothing happened. And when you start to go that long after getting updates basically every other month, you're kind of going, oh. And sure enough, it's an uh-oh. I think Kid as a person, unless you're going to blow him away with a financial offer that just sets him for life. And as much as I love Kit Harrington, he's not Robert Downey Jr. He's not getting the Avengers Doomsday and Avengers whatever the hell it's called deal. But he needs more time away. Like when we talk Game of Thrones sequel series, we're probably talking about something that debuts 5, 6, 7, 8 years from now. I think you see the Aegon the Conqueror show before then, and you probably see a Robert's Rebellion show before then too.
I'm still skeptical about how soon we're getting Robert's Rebellion, because out of the list of stuff that has been brought up, it hasn't even made the list. So
there's one untitled live action show.
that doesn't mean shit. Like, I'm sorry, dude. That doesn't mean shit. So, I mean, and the other problem too is you look at The Long Night. If it doesn't meet snuff, if it doesn't meet the standards that even the studio wants it to, then there's a chance we may never even see something make it to the light of day. And so when they say it's untitled or still in pre-production or whatever, they're not announcing it because they're scared it's not going to be good. And if they're that scared that it's not going to be good, then we don't deserve to know the title. And if we don't deserve to know the title, then it doesn't deserve to be Robert's Rebellion that they're working on. I think that needs to be something that they need to know is going to be a home run, and they need to announce it sooner rather than later and go through with it. So if they're being chicken about what they're calling it, then they don't have faith enough in their own program to announce it. That's how I see it.
I
But-
see that point, and I only speak for myself, but like when they talk about the 10,000 ships thing or the however many voyages show, like none of that stuff interests me. I got to be honest. I'm not saying I won't watch it, but I have more interest in like a Night of the Seven Kingdoms than I do any of that stuff. I think, like, let's remember that they spent, what was it, north of $60 million on Blood Moon, and only one episode of it, the pilot, and they didn't go forward. Most people think you spent $60+ million on a pilot and scrapped it, and like it was just set too far back. We're talking about the age of the first Long Night, and it's a little too coy. Like you're basically telling people are a little too out there in terms of what you want people to grab onto. You're telling people, oh well, the only connectable thing is it's the first Long Night, and it's not going to be the whole series. So it's like that was out. I think a lot of those other things that are out, until I see, is it Lord of the Rings that has the animated thing coming out this year?
They do.
So until I can see what they do with something animated, I have zero confidence in ever seeing anything Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon animated till one of these other places can show they can do it properly. Because you don't want Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon to do an animated show and it be like, oh, your live action show looks fantastic and your animated show looks like dog shit. It's not just a storytelling thing, it's the way you present the show as well. And, outside of Aegon the Conqueror, which I think will go forward, the people outside of Matt Reeves, a couple of the other guys that are involved with the Batman are doing that. So you got some talent behind that. And I mean, we've heard about Aegon the Conqueror since Game of Thrones, right? So I do think as long as a pilot doesn't tank there, we'll get that. And A Night of the Seven Kingdoms is supposed to get, I think it's 2 seasons somehow. It's and he's not done that material either, by the way.
It either needs to be 1 or 3. You shouldn't do 2, but I digress. Because you either do 1 miniseries for each novella, or you just do 2 episodes for each novella and be done with it in 6 episodes. I don't think doing it in 2 seasons makes any sense for a 3 novella set of stories. But unless they're combining 2 into 1, who knows?
Well, you had mentioned you had a hard time seeing the first one being stretched into 6 episodes, right? And then it's like, can you even get the third one done? You're still not done Winds of Winter, let alone Dream of Spring.
Right.
So, like, there's a level of this where George R. R. Martin's his own worst enemy. And I do agree when Robert's Rebellion gets announced, like, it's going to be a big deal. And I do think one day it will get made. But you also, like, that has to be a home run. You can't go do Robert's Rebellion and have Blood Moon happen.
Right. Randy, even though Kit Harrington has stepped away from this particular project, what do you feel would be the correct circumstances and what would be a good storyline that you would watch that you think could bring him back into the fold?
Well, I think his original idea to have something that's self-contained to where it truly is a focus on him, but what you could do with it, and I'm not saying it is it would be a popular thing to do, but you could sit there and still, yes, kind of have your sequel spin-off. You can have it branch into that, but what you could do is, you know, have the character die and then have it branch out from there, trying to figure out, who actually killed, who killed Jon Snow, and then branch out to the different houses who would have had a beef with him, and at least, but like for the first, 6 episodes, keep it contained the way he was looking for it to be contained, and then write him out eventually to where he doesn't have to worry about all the conditions he had to go through when he was doing Game of Thrones. Think about um The Force Awakens. One of the only reasons Harrison Ford came back to play Han Solo is so Han Solo could die, because that's what he wanted in Return of the Jedi to begin with.
Right.
So if you can be like, hey, look, we're going to give you exactly what you want. We're going to give you that 6 episodes, and we're going to make it as much about your character as we humanly possibly can. But the caveat is, we're going to off the character so you don't so at least your story that you wanted to tell is told, and then we're going to branch out from there. Could it work? Maybe. Could it be worth the payday? Again, maybe. It really depends on him and if he's okay with the idea of that character being killed off. But if it gets him the story he wants, gets it the length he wants, gets the money he wants, I as a individual, if that was presented to me, I'd have a hard time saying no, just because at least my artistic vision, what I had in my head, finally gets to be shown. And I don't know, that'd be a pretty sweet deal because think about the emotional outpouring and of whether it's good or bad, because it's, there'd be pissed off people, but Jon Snow dies in some tragic way that hits fans a certain way and is talked about for, could be years, could be decades, could be only months, but still there's that idea of actually pulling the trigger on something like that and taking that chance, that it might be actually kind of cool.
Sean, you're up. You said you had a thought.
Yeah, not to shit on Randy's thought, but fuck no. I sat through one Star Wars sequel trilogy. I don't need to sit through another. Harrison Ford came back, kill my guy off. Mark Hamill wasn't that way, but it's like their mission, kill one character off each movie. It's, to me, you need some narrative reason behind it. I'm not saying Jon Snow dying can't happen, but you just flat out don't bring him back unless you find a way to write him off screen. Because North of the Wall extends. Who knows how far North of the Wall really truly extends. So who knows where he is necessarily. But you don't bring him back unless the narrative can live up to that of Game of Thrones. And for me, there's one answer. There's always been one answer for a Game of Thrones sequel series, and that is Arya doesn't come back. Arya went to go see what was west of Westeros, never comes back. And you get a ragtag group of people with a bunch of new characters that goes and looks for Arya, and you spend basically your entire show not in Westeros looking for Arya. And I would assume Jon Snow would be part of that team that goes and looks for her. And then maybe they bring back, and I don't mean intentionally, I mean something follows them back from Westeros, or from what's west of Westeros to Westeros. And that sets you up with your big, I'm not saying it's like the Night King Part 2 or whatever, but your big oh fuck, apocalyptic type thing, and maybe Jon Snow doesn't make it back from what's west of Westeros, and the character that he really had the most emotional attachment to, that everybody wanted to see the reunion of, was Arya, and maybe that's how he loses his life, is she does make it back, and he's falls to whatever else is going to come back and hunt whoever's in Westeros. I think it's just such a clean slate, especially if you don't involve George R. R. Martin in that. And it's like whatever creative gets involved with that, it's like, okay, so we have this other continent that doesn't have a name, where there's all sorts of crazy Harry Potter like shit happening, or Lord of the Rings like shit happening. And, it just opens up endless possibilities. And you also don't need to lean on, you know, 20 surviving cast members from Game of Thrones. They can be in it occasionally here and there, but maybe you're leaning on 4 or 5 of them.
I think it would be interesting to see what's west of Westeros be more advanced than Westeros. I think if there is something west of Westeros that has cannons, I mentioned earlier that cannons aren't a thing right now in the Game of Thrones lore. If you have some sort of quasi advanced, I'm not saying like we need industrial revolution and submarines and shit like that in Game of Thrones, but if we have something that is slightly more advanced, logical, but also a threat to our heroes, that ends up coming back to Westeros and becomes like the thing that could end up helping these people conquer a new land, a new world, then yeah, it could become like a really big event that forces rivaling factions to come together, or else they'll be conquered by a group that they don't want to be conquered by, that type of thing. So you don't have, well, you don't really have dragons to speak of at this point in the show. So there is no defense for whatever this new technology would be.
You have one, and he's probably not inclined to help you all that
and
much.
he's probably not coming back anytime soon, right? So you're on your own, and you got to figure out how to beat something that is more advanced than you. I think that would be an interesting storyline. But all speculation and all in good time. I think it's pretty safe to assume that all three of us feel like a sequel is coming at some point or another, even if it's not right at this very moment. It's something that the world of Westeros is likely to see in our lifetime. So as long as we all remain in relatively decent health, and that's something we can all look forward to. But I think we do need to start wrapping and calling it a night. Sean, any final thoughts, and where can the folks keep up with you in between these episodes?
Number one way you can help is just like, comment, subscribe, turn notifications all to keep up to date with all of our content. I'm still going to be putting out short form content as news comes out whenever I'm available to do so. And then the week of September 16th, you'll get our review of the Game of Thrones second pilot, since nobody has seen the first one. At least nobody in public. You can also check us out over on Haddonfield and Beyond. Lots of good stuff happening there. The Legacy of Star Wars did a video today on the Acolyte being canceled. Tomorrow we're going to talk a little bit more about that on a live stream, as well as give our takes on what we would do with Lucasfilm if we were in charge. You can also check out our Fandom Haven YouTube channel, which is more comic book movies in general and wrestling talk. But Zach, if it weren't for you, we would have a harder time doing this show. Why don't you tell everybody about that?
Yeah, I can. Zach Arnold Productions is a media group that I founded a couple of years ago, and it's been primarily broadcasting here in the Dallas, Texas area. And it's just continued to grow and to expand. And we're looking at finding ways to help behind the scenes with certain web shows and things like that as well. And so it felt logical to try to partner with the Legacy of Westeros, since I'm a part of it. And we're doing some things to kind of help keep this show regular and keep it consistent. So If you're interested in learning more about some of the football and baseball and soccer stuff that goes on here in Texas, or if you're interested in seeing how we can help you start up a podcast or a web show, or we have work in marketing and PR as well. So kind of a Zach of all trades instead of a Jack of all trades type of work going on. But yeah, just hit me up at Zach the Voice, or find Zach Arnold Prod for Zach Arnold Productions on X, Twitter, and just follow along there as well as here on this page in order to keep up with some of the other content. They also help produce the IPC podcast, which I've been a part of for a decade now. So this isn't something new. It's just kind of a new name, but these energetic media solutions are things that we have been looking for since IPC's inception, and we've just got a place to better channel it now. So yeah, that's our partnership with the Legacy of Westeros. Randy, thanks for being on tonight. I know it probably went a little bit beyond what we promised you, but appreciate you sticking it out with us, and looking forward to the next time we all get together. But what kind of stuff would you be on in between these episodes?
So with Sean, we do the Legacy of Star Wars. I'm really excited to give my thoughts on what I would do if I ran Lucasfilm, just because I've been thinking the minute
He wants to kill all your favorite characters.
No, that would be Johnny. But also with the football season upon us, my friends and I do a podcast called The Sports Brew, and we're actually gearing up to record our first episode of the season Thursday night. It'll be out on pretty much all podcatchers within a couple days after we record. You can find me on X at Giggity Giles. Been posting a little bit more there. I'm on Instagram and Threads, but I don't really post it or anything like that there. So your best bet is to find me on X. And I'm gonna assume, Sean, we're gonna get a little Fandom Haven going here, because we got All In coming up here, and we need to get them predictions in.
Yeah, in short order, there's All In, All Out, the WWE Germany
Bash
show.
Berlin.
Yeah, there's a lot.
Crazy 3 weeks coming.
It's a crazy time for all of us, but somehow we got the schedules to align for this particular episode, and for that, I'm very grateful. And to you, the listeners and the viewers, we're also grateful that you were along for the ride. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button, hit that bell so that you know when new content drops, and give us a 5-star rating wherever your podcatchers are found. We'd love to hear your feedback and get some thoughts on whatever our next conversation should be. But you also know that we've got upcoming conversations in very short order, less than a month away from a episode by episode discussion of the original Game of Thrones. So that's something to look forward to as well. But that's going to do it for this edition of House of the Empire. For Sean and Randy, I'm Zach, thanking you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time when the Empire returns.
Do you know what legacy means?
It's what you pass down to your children and your children's children. It's what remains of you when you're gone.